Donc, bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Merci d'être là aussi nombreux au Dissident Club. Nous sommes là aujourd'hui pour fêter la sortie d'un livre qui s'appelle Dissident Club. C'est une bande dessinée. Elle est réalisée par ces deux messieurs qui sont juste devant moi. Siddiqui, qui est scénariste de l'album et... suffisamment longtemps, vous allez vite comprendre que cet album raconte sa vie et son parcours du Pakistan jusqu'à ici, en passant par l'Arabie Saoudite. Et Hubert Maury, qui est juste à côté de Taha, qui est également scénariste de l'album et dessinateur de ces 300 et quelques pages.
The story begins 36 years ago in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And you can see my parents here who have arrived, and my mother is pregnant with me. And my father has arrived in Saudi Arabia for work from Pakistan. When I arrived here in 2018, I was contacted by some publishers from the West who told me that they had heard about my story, and for them, my story was, interesting, and I should tell it, and I should tell an autobiography because of what happened with me. Because I survived a kidnapping and assassination attempt, and before that, I had a lot of threats in Pakistan because of my journalism. So I started discussing with a few French writer friends of mine and said that, I have this idea that I want to talk about with my autobiography. I want to talk about my life and what I lived. And one of my friends suggested that, have you ever thought of doing comic books or a graphic novel? So I did not know much about comic books at that time, but one thing that I did know was that when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to have comic books because my father was very religious. So I thought, if I do a comic books autobiography, it would kind of be like an act of resistance to challenge my own childhood, to challenge the society I used to live in. And because my journalist friends and writer friends who I discussed my story with, they said that your story is quite visual. So this was in 2018, and then in 2019 I started looking at different options for cartoonists, and I found another journalist friend of mine connected with me with Hubert Maury, who's my cartoonist. And together we did the pitch and the synopsis, and we sent it to different publishers. And we got Edition Glina interested in it, and we did a contract with them in 2019, and then I worked for it for 3 years until it was ready somewhere last year, and then we launched it last month. This is where armed people come and try to kidnap me. Well, the book opens with the attack on my life. It's the first scenes, you can see the assassination and the abduction attempt. But then it stops over there, and it's sort of like it starts with a lot of action, but then it goes a little bit slower into the past. And into the past, it goes into the 35 years of my life, because I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and then I'm from Pakistan, but then after I moved back to Pakistan. So it talks about my childhood, my adolescence, and then my adult life and becoming a journalist. I mean, the first challenge is that basically I don't speak French. So for me to do a book for the French audience, I needed someone's help, but thankfully I found Hubert Maury, my co-author, who helped me a lot to do the translation work. So I wrote in English and he translated it for me in French. And he lived in Pakistan, so he understood Pakistan a little bit. So writing the book itself was a challenge a bit, but that's a different challenge. That's not a challenge as a migrant, but that's a challenge I had because when you write about your own self, it's hard to do a distance from your own story. And in your head, sometimes your own life doesn't make sense, but you have to make it sense because you want readers to make sense of it. So here I talk about that after the attack and the assassination attempt, I come into France and I've opened this bar J'ai donc ouvert ce bar, le Dissident Club. At the end of the book, you find out that the Dissident Club is a bar that I manage and I run, and where I do intellectual activities. So it's just right at the end of the book that we find out that I am in Paris and I am living here and I'm running the Dissident Club. The idea was to end the book at the Dissident Club and not talk further about my life in Paris, because I think there might be a sequel that I'm now working on already, and I want to talk about my life in Paris in the second book.